Was your ex an evil narcissist? Or maybe it was your fault and you're a hapless, codependent empath. These are the words that are in our popular vocabulary, and I don't think they necessarily reflect the complexities and the realities of very difficult, hurtful, or even abusive relationships. My name's Ruth Ann. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm an expert in relationships and issues of narcissism. And in this video, I want to talk about how to make sense of these relationships in a different way, in a way that's much more compassionate, much more empathic, much more appreciative of the quality of a relationship, and most of all, helps free you so you can be intentional about building new relationships in the future that are much more fulfilling and that really help your needs to be met, whatever end of the spectrum that you're coming from. One of the most helpful concepts applied to relationships where there are issues of narcissism is the concept of cognitive dissonance. Now, cognitive dissonance is the painful and uncomfortable feelings we have when we have contradictory beliefs, feelings, or information. And we're driven to resolve dissonance. And often as human beings, we try to resolve dissonance in overly simplistic ways. So one way to cope with the cognitive dissonance of having a partner who is abusive to you or behaving in ways that are very hurtful to you at times, and then at other times behaving in ways that are loving and nurturing to you, would be to blame yourself, to think that there's something about you that is creating this in your partner, to make excuses for them, and to kind of try to write off or ignore the extent of their behavior. If you've been in an abusive relationship, you probably recognize that dynamic, making excuses for them. Well, they're having a bad day. They're not always like that. He's struggling with something. She's struggling with something. And we make excuses in order to preserve our image of our partner as good, as warm, as loving. And we may even have a very idealized image of them, or idealized image of what we hope for from them in the future. And that is one way to cope with cognitive dissonance. It doesn't reflect reality, because the reality is that this person may well be behaving in ways that are loving. You may feel very close to them. You may have an understanding of them that other people don't have. They may have an understanding of you that other people don't have. And there may be something special in the quality of your relationship, but there is also potentially very hurtful, critical, abusive, and relationship harming behaviors that are ultimately extremely painful to be on the receiving end of. Now, when these relationships come to an end, I often see people almost do the flip, the absolute reverse of that, which is to say, well, this person was an evil narcissist. They were bad. They were evil, and they tricked me. They conned me into a relationship with them. And sometimes that can also come with a heavy dose of self-blame, of I was stupid, I had bad judgment, there's something fundamentally flawed about me, I am a codependent empath. And that paints a very simplistic black and white picture of the other person as being evil, irredeemable, beyond all hope, and potentially also a very critical picture of yourself, and a very disempowered picture of yourself as someone who had no influence and no sway over this relationship. And that is in many ways quite a disempowering place to be. I actually don't think either of those extremes are necessarily accurate in most relationships. And the majority of the time, I think relationships are much more complicated than that. And it's quite likely that any partner, even a partner who has become very hurtful or even abusive in the relationship, is not only an abusive and hurtful person. They probably have other qualities, and you've probably come to appreciate those qualities. Now, you may have overappreciated those qualities and downplayed the abusive and the hurtful aspects of their behavior in the relationship. But that doesn't stop those other qualities from existing. And likewise, you may have behaved in ways in the relationship that ultimately didn't serve you. Now, sometimes when you've been in a relationship where you have taken on a lot of blame, you have blamed yourself for conflict, for your partner's hurtful behavior, I think it is actually really important to make space for and hold the other person accountable and responsible for their part in the relationship. And it is necessary. So particularly for people who really blame themselves for their partner's behavior, for the quality of their relationship, I think it is necessary and helpful for them to recognize that it wasn't all on them, that the other person was responsible for their hurtful or abusive behaviors. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that you ought to talk to the other person about them or confront them, because often that doesn't tend to go very far. But in your own mind, being able to recognize the parts that the other person played and not just the parts that you played is a necessary part of getting a full and accurate picture. But if the only story you have is that my partner is an evil narcissist, you've got a very limited story. You've got a very limited picture. And so when I work with people who've been through these relationships, I really ask them to look at themselves and who did you become in this relationship? Did you become quiet, appeasing, self-blaming? Did you become feisty, argumentative, and critical right back? How are you now? What qualities are coming out of you now? Are you being quiet and appeasing and trying to keep the peace and trying to keep everyone happy? Are you fighting? Are you arguing? Even if it's just in your own head, are you indulging in revenge fantasies and anger and rage? And I'm not saying any of these things are right or wrong or good or bad, but it's about understanding them without any kind of judgment, but understanding the whole picture. Focusing on yourself and your own behaviors and your own who you became in this relationship can be really helpful, because you can ask yourself, what do I wish I had done more of? What do I wish I'd done less of? What do I wish that I'd done differently? And it can begin to open up a picture of, well, what would I like to develop? Where would I like to grow? That can inform where you focus your attention now to help you develop a different quality of relationship. So if you're someone who generally tends to people please and tiptoe around other people, working on assertiveness, on expressing your needs, on being able to say no when you want to say no, and yes when you want to say yes, in your other relationships, like your friendships or with your family, can be a really helpful thing to focus on. Or if you're someone who tends to be more feisty and argumentative and aggressive and defensive, you can find ways to work on being softer, being more forgiving, being more tolerant, being more interested and curious about people around you and what they have to say. And you can practice that in other relationships in preparation for future intimate relationships, if that's something that you want to do. When you're ready, you can also look at your partner and try to get a broader picture of your partner. So yes, they may have behaved in ways that are very hurtful and abusive, but was that all of them? Is that the only story there is to tell about them? There are probably good qualities in your ex-partner that attracted you to them in the first place. And allowing yourself the space to, at the same time, recognize where their behavior has been hurtful, or if it's been abusive, that it has been abusive, without excusing it, without making any kind of excuses or justifications for it, and also being able to appreciate their good qualities, the difficult background that they had and how it affected them, the things in them that you saw that you liked and you warmed to. You may even find that there is a part of you that feels really sad because you weren't able to meet your partner's needs, or you weren't able to be to your partner what you would have liked to have been to them, particularly if you saw their more vulnerable sides and that you felt that you would really like to help them. Now, that you haven't been able to is not a reflection on you. It may well be a reflection on them or the quality of your relationship. So this is not about blaming. It's not about excusing. It's just about understanding. And you can hold that at the same time as recognizing that their behavior was hurtful or abusive to you. And if you can do that, I think it's very helpful. One, I think it's very helpful in allowing you to make peace with the situation, that you weren't an idiot to get in a relationship with this person, that they're a complicated person. There are good and bad aspects to them. I also think it can be very helpful if you need to navigate an ongoing relationship with them. If you have children together, or you're in the same social circle, or maybe the person who hurt or abused you is actually a family member, like a parent or a sibling or someone within your extended family, and you still have contact with them. Being able to appreciate the complexity may open up more possibilities for you to relate to them in a way that is as peaceful and as amicable as possible. So I'd love to get some feedback about whether this is helpful, and what is helpful to you in making sense of relationships, past relationships, navigating ongoing relationships with someone that you've had a very difficult or hurtful or even abusive relationship with at times. How have you made peace with that and moved on, and hopefully formed relationships that are much more fulfilling for you with other people? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe if you'd like to hear more from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, take good care.